Okay, here is my my plan, and I'd like to get your, because I'm afraid that we're being set up and that we're being pushed down a road that is exactly the wrong road. And the president, whenever he takes his time on something, it's usually very bad for America. You know, he took his time on Iran. Hey, I didn't have time for 2 weeks to talk about those uprisings. When it's bad for America, he's right there. So I'm afraid that the American people are not going to know what to do. So let me propose a solution here, or a step. Close all embassies that won't be protected. That the country says, we can't guarantee your safety. Fine, out. Cut all the aids to those countries that won't stand with us and strongly come against these people. A very strong statement on Israel that we can't help you, but we should stand behind you because we know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And then the most controversial, I don't know about this table, pull all of our troops out of Afghanistan and rest, reload, and prepare, because something bad's coming. Any comments on that?
Look, I think we should have been out of Afghanistan
long ago.
Long ago. Our guys are sitting ducks there. They're not doing anything that advances our national security. They haven't been really for a number of years now. We should have a minimal amount of involvement. They'll all say that they can protect us, right? I think maybe our test ought to be any place where the Marines can't have live ammunition, we shouldn't be in.
We shouldn't be there.
I mean, we just
what are we doing?
You know, I mean, from what Louis Gohmert says, it sounds like that, you know, to arm the Marines. I guess Obama just gave $1.5 billion to the Egyptian military. Maybe they can get arms from the Egyptian military, since we're not going to get them from the American president. Let me just say one other thing, though. I think there is a logic to what was done by the Muslim Brotherhood with respect to this latest round of mayhem. The Obama administration has been on a jihad of sorts since 2009 against the First Amendment. They have been proposing these resolutions. Steve talked about the OIC. They've been proposing this in conjunction with the OIC since 2009. I actually think one of the most disheartening and almost downright cowardly things that happened in the last 48 hours is when the State Department issued that atrocious statement. The Obama administration tried to walk it back. Glenn, if you look at that statement, that is a statement of Obama administration policy going back to 2009. The embassy in Egypt, in Cairo, didn't do anything other than put out what has been the Obama administration's position for 3 years.
But we're up against an election.
But what they have done here is they've been encouraged by Obama to think that he will stand with their version of Sharia suppression rather than our version of the First Amendment. For them, this is the low-hanging fruit. This was a real opportunity to grab this, and that's exactly what they're trying to do, and they're making a big point. I mean, I think that's exactly what they're doing.
Glenn, for years there have been people in the State Department telling us Egypt is a strong ally. We should support Egypt and not only Israel. And look what's happening today. You're giving Egypt hundreds of millions of dollars. They're buying German submarines. Right. What they will do with those submarines, the Muslim Brotherhood, what they will do, they will use it to protect the area or to attack Israel eventually, or maybe the United States of America. And I think some people have to wake up in the United States. We woke up. We tried.
Americans are awake. It's our administration and those people in Washington that are dead asleep or worse. They're wide awake and they're on the wrong side.
You know, I was here in New York City during the commemoration of 9/11 2 days ago, and people were speaking about it. It can happen again. If Iran will become nuclear, nobody guarantees you that the first attack will be against Israel. It can be here in New York City again. And I think some people in Washington want you to forget about it, forget about the risk, forget about the hatred. Listen to Ahmadinejad. He's coming to New York City in 2 weeks' time. He will speak in the UN, 2 blocks from here again. But what he will be saying there, I want to wipe out Israel, the little Satan, but after that I'm going after the US. And you are funding the UN, allowing him to come to the US again. You should tell the UN, Ahmadinejad will not speak here in 2 weeks' time. He's not welcome here. It's like before the Second World War. If Hitler would have come to the U.S., you would have opened the doors for him. It is very similar to what we're seeing here.
We're throwing the doors open on the holiest day of the year, too, for the Jewish community. Anybody have any comment on, is Iran involved in any of this? Are they pulling the strings? I read a report from the intelligence that, U.S. intelligence, that Iran and Egypt are now starting to coordinate with intelligence.
I would be very suspicious about that. I think that the focal point you should use to look at that is Syria. And right now you basically have the Assad government being backed by the Iranians, and you have the resistance, which is basically the Muslim Brotherhood. So long as they're bitterly engaged in a dispute there on the other opposite sides, I would be very skeptical of what I'm reading about the role of Iran.
What should we be looking for as American people? What are we missing? What is the thing that people who are watching this say, I should go investigate this on my own, or I should look for these signs in the coming days? What are we looking for?
I would opine again that I think it's very important. I agree with you that we should pull out U.S. military forces from these contested areas, especially in Egypt and Libya and so forth, and in North Africa. But I think the American people need to understand that the Muslims would not be capable of doing what they're doing if they did not have money and support from the European Union. And that's why I think we should pull out our troops, and we should say, if you want troops to patrol there, to the European nations, put your troops on the ground. They have money, they have troops.
Well, we saw this in Thomas Jefferson's time. They don't do well.
Well, true, but it's,
well, don't get me wrong, neither are we.
It's a situation of their own creation, and I think that Americans need to understand that better. The European Union actually has a policy called the neighborhood policy, dealing with the neighbors of Europe, and part of this policy is to mold the countries of North Africa and the Middle East, and to elevate and develop them in such a way to prepare them to be incorporated into the European Union. They call this the neighborhood policy. It is aimed towards incorporating North Africa into the European Union. And I believe this whole Arab Spring campaign is part of that European agenda. And I think that Americans have been enlisted to serve as the muscle to implement what is really a European policy, primarily for their benefit, so they can get control over energy resources that they need very desperately, and which we do not need as desperately. That's.
But Glenn,
I'm sorry, Tim.
Iran is also a source of evil. Let's not ignore it. Look at the Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's being funded by Iran. Look at the Hamas in Gaza. They are being funded by Iran. And who is the Hamas organization? The only organization that condemned the killing of Osama bin Laden was the Hamas organization. So they have links, and they give a lot of money to whoever wants to hurt the U.S. and Israel and the Jewish people. When you look at the terror attack that happened in South America and 2 months ago in Europe, it was coming from Iran. They're doing it smartly. They're using their embassies. They're using the money that they have, but they are behind a lot of things that's happening here.
Now, Iran is also being, Turkey is also funding Hamas, our NATO ally.
And our good friend, our president's good friend.
Yes, the closest friend, Erdogan. But you asked, what should people be looking for in the next days? I would say, don't be overwhelmed by all this chatter about democracy. There's been too much of that. What's going on in that region is the use of the electoral process as a tool, not the culture of democracy. And when they say democracy, what they mean is a route to power to impose Sharia. That's the process that they're about. And every time they say democracy, we ought to be thinking Sharia. If we could get people to make that connection, we'd be about 50 yards beyond where we are now.
In 1990, the Organization Islamic Conference, on behalf of all their 57 member states, created something called the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, that they formally served the United Nations in 1993, saying that when we, an Islamic entity, use the word human rights, we mean and only mean Sharia law. When you take a look at the Muslim Brotherhood Party in Egypt, it's the Freedom and Justice Party.
I know.
That means freedom freedom from the laws of man, justice according to Islamic law.
Okay. I want to thank you guys. And Danny, I know you've got to go back to Israel. You send a message to everybody you see. We are not our government. There are millions of Americans that stand behind Israel. There are millions of Americans that know this is crazy.
You need to come again to Jerusalem, Glenn, and say it again to the people.
As I said to you, as I know there's something that we're putting up on the internet here, an interview that we did earlier, and I don't know if I said this on the air or in person, but if Barack Obama wins again, I am coming back to Jerusalem before Christmas, and I may bring moving boxes with me. We'll be back in just a second. Hang on.